Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So where else would we start? Brexit, of course. How could we not? Defence Secretary Michael Fallon has been talking about it this morning. He coined a new term, full Brexit, and he was asked if Britain was going to be leaving the EU single market.
This is Brexit. This is full Brexit, if you like. We're going to be outside the European Union, but we still, because it's over 40% of our trade, we still want to maximise our trade with it.
One final question. Again, looking at today's papers, you see soft Brexiteers briefing against hard Brexiteers and vice versa. This is terribly damaging for the Cabinet, presumably. What is your message to the briefers on both sides?
Well, we are all Brexiteers now. We're respecting the judgment of the decision of the British people, and we've got to make a success of it.
So, a lot of briefing against Mr Hammond after his speech to the Tory conference. A nabob of negativity was the rough description. Then Mr Hammond's people briefing against people like Liam Fox, David Davis, Boris Johnson. Today, one phrase was they're talking nonsense and garbage. When do we get the first Brexit resignation?
That's a very good question, Andrew. What you've got here, I mean, we've got full Brexit, we've got open and closed Brexit, we've got soft and hard Brexit. The Prime Minister doesn't want to provide a running commentary, so all her ministers are coming up with ever more audacious ways of trying to tell us nothing but in interesting ways. I don't think anybody's going to resign, but I think the interesting thing is that you've got a situation where yes, everybody's a Brexiteer now, but there are very different views about how this is going to go forward. And the Prime Minister herself, you know, she did two things last week. She gave a speech for a domestic audience and she gave a speech for a foreign audience. And on both, she's trying to embody the hopes and dreams of a group of people who feel they've been left out, the people who've been left behind on the domestic front and also voted for Brexit. But by embodying those people and fighting for their cause, she's having to take a hard line on immigration, and that's defining the kind of Brexit that we're going to have.
There may be no one about to resign now, but we're only 100 days into this May government, and the briefing on both sides of the so-called hard Brexit versus the so-called soft Brexit, which the Treasury now seems to embody the soft Brexit approach, Mr Hammond. The briefing is fierce. It's going to lead to trouble, to blood.
Well, I think this is a peak time for briefing. If you think about what's just happened, we've just come away from Tory party conference where every journalist worth their salt is working the party circuit, going to all the dinners, and of course it's an easy agenda to get every cabinet minister that you lunch or dine with to give you their version of what Brexit should mean. So there's a kind of a melting pot here which is bubbling away. So things may become a little bit more disciplined in the week ahead, but I don't think it's sustainable really for Theresa May to say she's not going to give a running commentary. First of all, it's a red rag to every journalist. It's also a red rag to all her own cabinet, and I think that you can't keep that going for the next few months. She is going to have to give a clearer guide as to whether it's hard, soft, you know, in, out, whatever it is, the type of description that she's aiming for.
Mrs May is going to have to employ what was once called the smacker firm government, isn't she? With her own government.
She's been smacking away already. I mean, you've had all three of the Brexiteers being told that actually they were airing their personal opinions, and the fact that they're ministers in charge of this obviously means it's totally irrelevant. But I think, I mean, Tim referenced this in his article this morning. There's political and there's economic things at work here. And the trouble is, what no one will say is, you can have hard Brexit, but it will probably, almost certainly have economic consequences. And how do you go as a politician to the country and say, we hear you want to control immigration, but that means that the country will be poorer, and they won't do that. So as long as that fault line exists, and people are always going to be kind of straddling it in some really uncomfortable way.
Okay, well, we'll be talking more about this as the programme goes on. You'll not be surprised to hear. This week, Theresa May closed her party's conference with a speech designed to grab the centre ground of British politics. She positioned the Conservatives as champion of the working classes, pledged to help those left behind by globalisation. We'll wait, of course, to see what any of that means in practice. But it was what she said, had to say about Britain's exit from the EU that had the biggest immediate impact, not least on the value of the pound, as the world began to get a clearer sense of what Brexit might mean. Here's Tom Barton with the details.
We now know when the process of leaving the EU will begin. Theresa May has set a deadline of the end of next March for triggering Article 50, which formally begins the Brexit process. That allows only 2 years to do a deal, so we should be out of the EU by the end of March 2019 at the latest. The government will also introduce a so-called Great Repeal Bill next year, which will end our membership of the EU. Theresa May talked of Britain being a fully independent, sovereign country. The Prime Minister also said she will prioritise controlling immigration by ending the free movement of people. Because being subject to the European Court of Justice and free movement are key requirements of membership of the EU single market, this strongly suggests the Prime Minister does not see Britain remaining a member. So that much is clear, but there were some mixed messages about life after Brexit. The ability of EU citizens to stay in the UK remains a grey area. Brexit Secretary David Davis said they would be 100% able to stay, while Theresa May struck a more cautious tone. And Home Secretary Amber Rudd's plan to shame firms that take on foreign rather than British staff faced a backlash from business and political opponents. There was also a range of mood music about life as we head for the door. Chancellor Philip Hammond was at one end, warning the country to brace for a rollercoaster ride ahead. But Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson attacked what he called Gloomadon poppers and said Britain will be more active on the world stage than ever before.
Well, I'm joined now by the Liberal Democrat leader, Tim Farron. He's in Kendal, and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Ian Duncan-Smith. He's in Dunstable. Let me come straight to the point. First of all, with you, Ian Duncan-Smith, is it now clear that whatever relationship we will have with the single market, we will not be a member of the single market when Brexit is complete?
I think when you add all these things together, it becomes, I believe, pretty clear, really, that what the Prime Minister said, what has been said by a number of other Cabinet Ministers, if our centre, which is what the British people hugely voted for, the centre of our negotiation is that we intend to control our borders and the flow of migrants from the European Union, which has caused, in some cases, a great deal of damage to workers and their incomes at the bottom level and the unskilled level, then that means that there is no way, really, that the European Union will be able to allow us to be a member of the single market, which, by the way, is not the same as access. So I think we add this together. Yeah.
You think it right. Tim Farron, do you accept that that's the way we're going, that we are, whatever access, whatever arrangements we have, and we will have some arrangements, even North Korea has access to the single market, but we won't be a member?
Well, that looks to be the way that the government is taking us, but that's a massive mistake. And I think Ian is wrong to say that there's been a massive decision in favour of us leaving the single market, if that's what he's implying. You could argue that, well, indeed, it's a given that a small majority voted to leave the EU, but nobody voted to leave the common or single market. This seems to me flying in the face of all the economic indicators of whatever the British people want and what is best for British jobs. We're going to, seeing from the Conservative Party, a reinterpretation of the result, if you like, a theft of the result for a hard Brexit that nobody voted for. And I think in 20 years' time, people will look back
that's a very strong
and
point,
will hold people like
Tim Farron.
Ian Duncan-Smith to account.
We haven't got too much time this morning, so I'm going to try and keep this moving quickly. How do you respond to that, Ian Duncan-Smith?
It's total and complete utter rubbish. I mean, the reality is that the British people made a very clear decision. They were asked a very simple question, Tim, just in case you hadn't bothered to read the ballot paper. It's, do you want to stay in or do you want to leave the European Union?
Stay in the single market? Did they ask that?
Yeah,
Did they ask whether they wanted to leave the single market, Tim?
You need to go and have a look at the rules around this. The single market is part of the European Union. Whether you like it or not, the British people voted to leave.
So do you think we should be in the single market?
Do you think
we should be in the single market?
Well,
no, I think
do you agree with the overwhelming majority of massive business?
No, I'm sorry. Look, the massive benefits that exist for us to be able to trade with the European Union, have access. After all, America has access. They sell more to the European Union than we do.
North Korea has access. We've already agreed that.
Hold on, there's no point talking over each other because you're too far away. Let me come to Tim Farron. If you want to be in the single market, you have to accept free movement. You have to accept the jurisdiction of the European Court. In effect, that's membership of the EU. Isn't that what we voted against?
Precisely.
So look, the point is...
I hadn't thought one.
Sorry, was that for me,
Tim,
Andrew?
had you?
Hold on, Tim Farron, I'm talking
Sorry,
to.
yeah, OK. Sorry, yeah, thank you, Andrew. Look, the reality is that and I absolutely do accept the result of the referendum, by the way. It was a tiny majority, but it was a majority, and the direction of the United Kingdom is towards leaving the European Union as things stand. I have to say, by the way, that the deal that we get at the end, as Lord Kerr, the writer of Article 50, agreed with me overnight, that you must put the deal to the British people in a referendum because destination is not the same as departure. You can't start this process with democracy, as we did in June, and end up with a stitch-up, which is what the British people are going to get. There are many people around the country who voted to leave the European Union, but they will not agree, I'm certain, with having imposed upon them a complete exit from any relationship with our biggest and nearest market and friends and neighbours, which is going to cost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs.
Let me get you to respond to that, Ian Duncan-Smith.
Well, first of all, Lord Kerr has admitted that when he drafted Article 50, he didn't mean it ever to help Britain or any other country leave. He deliberately designed it so that it would make it so difficult to leave, it would almost be nigh impossible. So I'm not really prepared to listen to Lord Kerr. The second thing about the point that Tim makes, which is complete nonsense, is the idea somehow that we're going to lose tens of thousands of jobs because what we're looking for is a free trade relationship with the European Union. And that is the key point about this. We're not leaving Europe. We're leaving the European Union, but we intend, as they do,
is the problem,
to cooperate and trade. There's not a problem in that for common sense and for decent people.
Hold on, Tim Farron. Ian Duncan-Smith. No, hold on, Tim Farron. Ian Duncan-Smith. Sterling has slumped at the prospect of hard Brexit as the markets has dawned on the markets that the government is heading for a so-called hard Brexit. Doesn't that give you pause for thought? Doesn't that make you think that this might not be the right course? I mean, if you go to the airport at the moment, you'd be lucky to get €1 for £1 now. Doesn't that make you think?
Well, not really, no, because I think what you know about the free-flowing currency is that it will fall and it will rise in accordance to what people speculate about what the next prospects or the future will be. The point, however, to look at is what is the underlying success story for UK business. Now, it used to be that the BBC, not you, Andrew, of course, but the BBC generally spent their whole time telling us how terrible things were if you look at the FTSE 250 or the FTSE 100. In the same period, we've just seen the FTSE 250, that's the small companies, the medium companies, that is now at record levels high. In other words, much higher than it was before we decided to leave European Union. Now, here's the other point. Actually, this is also hugely a story about a strong dollar. Britain, actually, the pound rose against the yen, whilst the dollar rose against the euro, the yen, and the pound. So here's the deal. The pound is doing our exporters a lot of good. Sorry, Tim, you've never sold anything in your life, so just listen for a second. The world's currency...
We're doing marginally better than the Argentinian
There's no point heckling, that's my job.
Hang on a second, you guys. The point is that the pound's fall actually means British business, like it did after the ERM, is now doing very well. And I think this is a very good thing.
All right, Tim Farron, other than the slump in sterling, what's gone wrong for the UK economy since June the 23rd?
Well, look, first of all, I'm not some doom-monger saying everything is absolutely calamitous.
No, but what's gone wrong?
First of all, I mean, much as I respect Ian Duncan-Smith, I actually take the views of Caroline Fairbairn and indeed all the other business leaders, people who wrote to the FT yesterday, those people who are former members of the Prime Minister's Business Advisory Council, who say that whatever your view on leaving the European Union, departure from the single market would be calamitous. And what is the really worrying indicator?
These are the same people, of course.
31-year low drop in the pound is what has happened, and we haven't even left yet. That is what worries me. And what worries me more than anything else is that you've got the British business community, who now feel the Conservative Party are listening to the kind of siren English nationalist voices that have taken over the Tory party rather than to good common sense business practice. When Roger Helmer, the UKIP MEP, tells you that you have gone too far, Ian, then you probably have gone too far.
All right, Ian Duncan-Smith, let me bring you back in. We haven't got time for speeches this morning from either of you. Ian Duncan-Smith, don't we need to give just a bit on free movement to secure open access? Won't that be a negotiation? If we want really good access to the single market, we will have to give something on free movement.
Actually, I wrote about a week ago in a paper which set out how you have control of your migration policy. which is flexible enough to allow people to come to jobs inside the UK or outside the UK. And that is the kind of flexibility that leaves the British government controlling that idea about how you access work through work permits. And that means for higher skilled people, there will be a very light touch regime, but for the low skilled area, which is where the most damage has been done, you have a tight regime. There's one point I want to make, though. You know, you say listen to British businesses. These are the self-appointed leaders of British business. Let me just tell you something. These are the same people that told us before Brexit that, no, hang on, they told us, just like you did, Tim, that we would crash and burn directly afterwards. There would be a terrible, calamitous fall. The British economy would be destroyed.
No, that was your leader who said that.
No, no.
Your leader
I
said
just
that.
wish you, Tim, and the rest of them would pause, get calm, and stop accusing everybody else of being extreme.
All right.
Because what they want is Britain to do well.
No,
that's what we're
after.
It's not my
Jim
party.
Farron.
Ian, it's not... Ian, sorry,
Jim Farron.
Andrew.
I've got one more question for you.
Thank you.
Why have you now lost a second peer in the House of Lords, Zahida Manzoor? She says you're not recognising the will of the people in the referendum by calling for a second referendum. She's joined the Tories. You already lost Baroness Nicholson. That's 2 down. How many more to go?
Yes.
Well, we're 20,000 up, Andrew. So it's a peculiar decision.
Not in the Lords.
I totally respect
so it. Seems like
but you only need to look at what's happened since June, with the Liberal Democrats gaining 20,000 members, hundreds, in fact thousands of them from the Conservatives, hundreds since their conference last week. You look at the by-election gains, Liberal Democrats winning 18 gains in the last 3 months.
So you're not sad to lose her,
and I take the... Well, I'm always sad to lose people, but I'm overjoyed to gain 20,000 times more people than I've lost.
We have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Come back and see us. Come to the studio where we can get a proper grip on this debate as it continues. Now, with Parliament returning tomorrow, Jeremy Corbyn has been reshuffling his shadow cabinet following his thumping win in this summer's leadership contest. And unlike previous reshuffles, it's been a pretty decisive affair, which has seen him give big jobs to his supporters. So what are the main changes? Mr Corbyn has moved ally Diane Abbott to Shadow Home Secretary, keeping Emily Thornby as Shadow Foreign Secretary, but moving Clive Lewis to Business. He's been replaced on the defence brief by Nia Griffiths. She's a long-time critic of the Trident nuclear deterrent. There's also a job for new Labour peer, Shami Chakrabarti. She recently carried out a report into anti-Semitism in the party. And Chief Whip Rosie Winterton is out. She's replaced by the veteran whip Nick Brown. You may remember him from the Gordon Brown years. Mr Corbyn has also brought back a number of shadow cabinet members who resigned in protest at his leadership in the summer. They include John Ashworth, his shadow health secretary, though he's also been removed from the crucial National Executive Committee, the NEC. That's Labour's ruling body, where power has been finally balanced between Mr Corbyn and his critics. Well, to discuss this, we're joined by the Labour MP, Corbynite critic, John Mann. Welcome to the programme.
Andrew.
Mr Corbyn says this is the most diverse shadow cabinet ever, the best team to take Labour forward. What do you say?
Well, it's his choice of team.
That bit I know.
And I think we should get on with the job now. I think he's won, whether people like it or not. And the last thing we want, I think, is a year of internalised, inward-looking Labour navel gazing.
Like the last year.
Like the last year. And, you know, one of the things I said, actually, I wasn't in favour of the timing of this challenge. But, you know, we actually have to get to grips with the referendum result and the fact that rather a lot of Labour voters voted to leave, unlike the general view in the Labour Party. So there's lots of issues we should be looking at, but we shouldn't be looking inwards.
Is there much of an olive branch from Mr Corbyn to the Parliamentary Labour Party in this?
I wouldn't call it an olive branch, but if I was him, I would have done pretty much what he has done. You know, he's won the election, and you know, if I was leader, I might choose different people, and that probably goes for every one of the 200 and plus members of the Parliamentary Party. But I think there's a bit of the idea you can negotiate a shadow cabinet or cabinet. I mean, it's important that he has all viewpoints represented somewhere, otherwise we'll be much weaker. And so we wait to see whether every view is going to get properly aired. That's vital, but he's got to make the call and the choices, and you know, if that upsets one or two people, so be it.
quite a heavy London representation in the key positions. How does that help people like you in the North and the Midlands?
Well, of course, he's following the trends of Tony Blair, was always keen on having lots of people who lived in London, and Ed Miliband even more so. So it's not a new trait. I think he's chosen the people, but what's crucial is with so many people from the metropolitan area that they spend a lot of time out in areas like mine, not talking to the members, not doing photo calls. They can do that if they want, but going and talking to voters. If they do that, I've got no objection. If they don't, then what that'll mean is that there isn't sufficient knowledge of what the wider electorate is thinking. Those shadow cabinet members every week should be out there knocking on real doors in areas they're perhaps not too familiar with.
Keir Starmer, he's your new shadow Brexit secretary. He said that there should be a vote on Article 50 now, that when the government moves Article 50, Parliament should vote. What do you think of that?
Well, let's see what... we're quite a way away from seeing what the government's going to do. I think what's vital in terms of Brexit is actually to get into the detail, because there's a lot of slogans, the full Brexit now, the soft Brexit, the hard Brexit. Actually, the issue is, what access do we get to markets? What access do we give to our markets? And is there any form of restriction on the free movement of labour? They're the three big issues. We need detail, and it's the negotiation, not in the British Parliament, but with the Germans and the French in particular, that's vital, and of course that hasn't begun.
Mr Corbyn told us at the Labour Party conference that he wasn't really that interested in controlling immigration. Mr Starmer said this morning on the BBC that immigration has to come down. You must be encouraged by that.
Well, we're a coalition. Mr Starmer, as the person responsible, I hope, will be talking to those of us who supported the Leave campaign in Labour, and more fundamentally getting out to those areas like mine, but many others, where the vast majority of Labour voters voted to leave. That, if he's going to do his job properly, is critical. I'm confident that he will do that.
Do you know yet what your party's policy is on immigration?
I'm sure that will emerge over time.
So you don't know yet?
Well, I don't know what the Conservative Party is either. So there's a bit of an impasse, and we don't know what the response of the Germans and the French is going to be. They've got elections next year. This is rather a moving feast in those countries. Therefore, we should be influencing the negotiations as Labour. It's crucial that our leadership talks and listens to Labour voters and to those who are a bit disenchanted with Labour, who voted Labour in the past.
All right. John Mann, thank you for that, being with us.